52. The Apostates.
Throughout the third part, in the beginning of each chapter, we were always told where Zarathustra was, as he was making his way back to his mountain and his cave. This chapter is different, and starts out like the chapters in the first part, where Zarathustra was just making speeches. We will have to wait to the end of the chapter to find out his current location.
1. Ah, lieth everything already withered and grey, which but lately stood green and many-hued on this meadow? And how much honey of hope did I carry hence into my beehives? Those young hearts have already all become old, and not old even, only weary, ordinary, comfortable. They declare it. We have again become pious. Of late did I see them run forth at early morn with valorous steps, but the feet of their knowledge became weary, and now do they malign even their morning valour.
This chapter is called the Apostates, and the Apostates, we find, are those who left atheism and went back to religion. It happened quite a bit in the Romantic movement. The Romantics rebelled against the Enlightenment emphasis on reason, and claimed that the irrational powers of man are the key to happiness and truth. But many of them failed to provide a secular explanation to these irrational powers, and ended up returning to God. Nietzsche poured derision on them, and here he puts it in the mouth of Zarathustra. We see that he is blaming it on their lack of courage and strength that made them choose the more comfortable life of following religious creed instead of facing the challenges and finding their own way.
Verily, many of them once lifted their legs like the dancer. To them winked the laughter of my wisdom. Then did they bethink themselves. Just now have I seen them bent down to creep to the cross. Around light and liberty did they once flutter like gnats and young poets, a little older, a little colder, and already are they mystifiers and mumblers and molly-coddles.
It turns out that Zarathustra isn't talking about the Romantics, who don't exist in his world anyway, but about his own disciples. Some of those who followed him, it turns out, have fallen back to religion, and they already developed all the bad traits which he associates with religious people.
Did perhaps their hearts despond, because lonesomeness had swallowed me like a whale? Did their ear perhaps hearken yearningly, long for me in vain, and for my trumpet notes and herald calls? Ah, ever are there but few of those whose hearts have persistent courage and exuberance, and in such remaineth also the spirit patient. The rest, however, are cowardly. The rest, these are always the great majority, the commonplace, the superfluous, the far too many. Those all are cowardly.
This all happened, then, since Zarathustra bid farewell to them, and started his current phase of wandering on his own. For many of them, apparently, his absence was unbearable, and they had to find someone else, so they went back to Christ. One is reminded of the Israelites, who started worshipping a golden calf when Moses was gone for too long. Most people are cowardly by nature, observes Zarathustra, and lack the courage to try the way that he is offering. To his chagrin, he realizes that this is true even of his disciples.
Him who is of my type will also the experiences of my type meet on the way, so that his first companions must be corpses and buffoons. His second companions, however, they will call themselves his believers, will be a living host with much love, much folly, much unbearded veneration. To those believers shall he, who is of my type, among men not bind his heart. In those springtimes and many-hued meadows shall he not believe, who knoweth the fickly, faint-hearted human species.
Zarathustra is recalling his journey. His first companions, in the prologue, were a buffoon and a corpse. Then he found disciples, and enjoyed being in their presence. It was hard for him to bid goodbye to them. But now that he heard what became of them, he concludes that it was wrong of him to get attached to them. The fact that they were disciples, and not people who go their own way, meant that they were not trustworthy companions. For some, being his disciples was just a phase in their journey. But for most, believing in him was all they wanted, and they had to find something else to believe in once he was gone.
Could they do otherwise, then would they also will otherwise. The half and half spoil every whole. That leaves become withered, what is there to lament about that? Let them go and fall away, O Zarathustra, and do not lament. Better even to blow amongst them with rustling winds. Blow amongst those leaves, O Zarathustra, that everything withered may run away from thee the faster.
He accepted disciples that weren't strong enough, he realizes. They were mediocre, and spoiled it for the rest. He is lucky to get rid of them, and from here on, he must demand more of his followers, to weed out the weaklings.
2. We have again become pious. So do those apostates confess, and some of them are still too pusillanimous thus to confess. Unto them I look into the eye. Before them I say it unto their face, and unto the blush on their cheeks, ye are those who again pray. It is, however, a shame to pray, not for all, but for thee and me, and whoever hath his conscience in his head. For thee it is a shame to pray.
This chapter has 2 parts. In the first part, Zarathustra was drawing personal conclusions from the realization that some of his disciples fell back to religion. In the second, he is going to speak to them. Quite harshly, we see. For some people, he says, religion is all right, but not for those whose conscience is in their heads, meaning those who think freely and let reason guide them. For them, it is a shame to pray.
Thou knowest it well, the faint-hearted devil in thee, which would fain fold its arms and place its hands in its bosom and take it easier, this faint-hearted devil persuadeth thee that there is a God. Thereby, however, dost thou belong to the light-dreading type, to whom light never permitteth repose. Now must thou daily thrust thy head deeper into obscurity and vapour.
The devil, says Zarathustra, is complacency and comfort, and this devil tempted them to return to God. They became part of those he called the light-dreading type, those who cower away from the light of reason and truth. This light can be uncomfortable, so they run from it into the darkness.
And verily thou choosest the hour well, for just now do the nocturnal birds again fly abroad. The hour hath come for all light-dreading people, the vesper hour and leisure hour, when they do not take leisure. I hear it and smell it, it hath come, their hour for hunt and procession, not indeed for a wild hunt, but for a tame, lame, snuffling, soft treaders, soft prayers hunt. For a hunt after susceptible simpletons, all mousetraps for the heart have again been set, and whenever I lift a curtain, a night moth rusheth out of it.
They chose their time well to rejoin religion, because religion is once again on the march. In the second half of the 19th century, as the great hopes sparked by Enlightenment and Romanticism were dashed, many Europeans turned again to Christianity. And, sensing that, the missionaries are out to hunt souls. This is one place where they are not looking for comfort and leisure, but are enthusiastically doing everything they can to convert people. Deep in their heart, says Zarathustra, they are night moths. The metaphor, it seems, is for those who prefer the artificial light created by humans at night over the light of day that represents the truth that there is nothing beyond earthly life.
Did it perhaps squat there along with another night moth? For everywhere do I smell small, concealed communities, and wherever there are closets there are new devotees therein, and the atmosphere of devotees. They sit for long evenings beside one another and say, let us again become like little children, and say, good God, ruined in mouths and stomachs by the pious confectioners. Or they look for long evenings at a crafty, lurking cross-spider that preacheth prudence to the spiders themselves, and teacheth that under crosses it is good for cobweb spinning.
He now starts to describe the characteristics of those who are night moths. They are like spiders, who spin cobwebs in order to trap others into their faith. The spider, for Zarathustra, is a metaphor for those who create systems of thought that attempt to encompass all of reality, and thus control it. The cross spider is a particular case, which uses Christianity in order to control.
Or they sit all day at swamps with angle rods, and on that account think themselves profound. But whoever fisheth where there are no fish, I do not even call him superficial. Or they learn in godly gay style to play the harp with a hymn poet, who would fain harp himself into the heart of young girls, for he hath tired of old girls and their praises. Or they learn to shudder with a learned semi-madcap, who waiteth in darkened rooms for spirits to come to him, and the spirit runneth away entirely. Or they listen to an old roving howl and growl piper, who hath learnt from the sad winds the sadness of sounds. Now pipeth he as the wind, and preacheth sadness in sad strains.
These metaphors all describe attempts at being spiritual, but since none of them are based on the light of reason, none of them can truly uplift the spirits.
And some of them have even become night watchmen. They know now how to blow horns, and go about at night, and awaken old things which have long fallen asleep. 5 words about old things did I hear yesternight at the garden wall. They came from such old, sorrowful, arid night watchmen.
The night watchmen are a metaphor for those who philosophize about religion. Since religion is represented by night here, it makes sense. Zarathustra tells us about the conversation he overheard between 2 night watchmen.
For a father he careth not sufficiently for his children. Human fathers do this better. He is too old, he now careth no more for his children, answered the other night watchman. Hath he then children? No one can prove it unless he himself prove it. I have long wished that he would for once prove it thoroughly. Prove? As if he had ever proved anything. Proving is difficult to him. He layeth great stress on one's believing him. Aye, belief saveth him, belief in him. That is the way with old people. So it is with us also.
It's the old religious debate about whether God cares about his creation, or whether he left us to our own devices after the act of creation was done, and about the place of faith in such a creation.
Thus spake to each other the 2 old night watchmen and light scarers, and tooted thereupon sorrowfully on their horns. So did it happen yesternight at the garden wall. To me, however, did the heart writhe with laughter, and was like to break. It knew not where to go, and sunk into the midriff. Verily it will be my death, yet, to choke with laughter when I see asses drunken, and hear night watchmen thus doubt about God. Hath the time not long since passed for all such doubts? Who may nowadays awaken such old slumbering, light-shunning things?
Zarathustra laughs at such musings, and says that their time has passed. In his life-affirming philosophy, God has no place, and such doubts seem silly. They just show how religion promotes irrational thought, and doesn't bring happiness.
With the old deities hath it long since come to an end, and verily a good joyful deity end had they. They did not begloom themselves to death. That do people fabricate. On the contrary, they laughed themselves to death once on a time. That took place when the ungodliest utterance came from a god himself. The utterance, "There is but one God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me." An old grim beard of a god, a jealous one, forgot himself in such wise. And all the gods then laughed, and shook upon their thrones, and exclaimed, "Is it not just divinity that there are gods, but no God? He that hath an ear, let him hear."
This is a funny little scene, and its message is that there isn't just one truth, in the sense of one way to interpret reality. Divinity was alive as long as it was pluralistic, as long as people believed in many gods, so if they lost their faith in one god, there were other gods they could turn to. Once one god claimed that he is the one and only God, the one and only truth, this assertion seemed so ridiculous to the other gods that they laughed themselves to death, and that God, namely Jehovah, doomed himself as well, since his claim to be the one truth was false, and led people to lose their belief in him. Thus, the whole concept of divinity has died, leaving us in a godless world.
Thus talked Zarathustra in the city he loved, which is surnamed the Pied Cow. For from here he had but 2 days to travel to reach once more his cave and his animals. His soul, however, rejoiced unceasingly on account of the nighness of his return home.
And, right at the end, we find out where we are. We are back in the Pied Cow, the city that saw Zarathustra's first clash with civilization, the city that was the backdrop to the entire first part of the book. This is where he found his first disciples, some of whom have now left him, so it makes sense that he felt the urge to talk about them. But this also means that we are very close to the end of Zarathustra's journey back home, very close to the awaited showdown against his abysmal thoughts.